For more on the possible responses to Syria, I'm joined by Phyllis Bennis from the Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome back to the show, Phyllis.
Thanks.
You know, a lot of talk today, a little more pulling back in some regard. Do you think the United States would actually strike, though, while UN inspectors are still working in Syria?
I think it's unlikely they would strike while the inspectors are inside. There is, of course, a precedent for this as well, when the Bush administration, in the 48 hours it gave as an ultimatum before hitting Iraq, demanded that the inspectors be pulled out. There was an effort to scuttle this mission. Secretary Kerry apparently urged Ban Ki-moon to pull out the inspectors, saying they haven't got enough time. It turned out that his story wasn't quite true. He was claiming that the Syrian regime had waited too long, in his words, before giving permission, that they had been asked on Thursday, they didn't give permission until Sunday. The facts turned out to be different. The facts were that the official notification from the United Nations, carried by Angela Kane, the disarmament chief of the UN, only came on Saturday. She presented it to the Syrians on Saturday. On Sunday, the Syrian government said yes, and on Monday, the inspectors were in the country. So there was no real delay. Secretary Kerry's position was really not quite honest.
Well, you know, the United States, it appears from what you're hearing, is ready to go at any moment, despite whatever happens from the United Nations. Do you really think it has compelling evidence to move forward?
If it does, we haven't seen it. I don't think they do. I think they have bits and pieces of evidence and bits and pieces of speculation and their version of what seems logical, and it could only be this. It's that kind of argument. There was a report in the Israeli newspapers 2 days ago indicating that Israeli intelligence officials were actually claiming credit for having provided to the U.S. the evidence that President Obama now seems to believe. There has clearly been a shift in recent days away from the hesitation that we had been hearing from President Obama for quite some time towards a much greater willingness. The fact that they were willing to even consider the so-called Kosovo precedent is very dangerous. That was the precedent of 1999 when they said, well, we can't get a resolution through the Security Council, Russia will veto it, so we'll ask NATO instead, as if NATO was a legitimate forced to make a decision like that, which it is not.
It doesn't seem like there's any good answer, because what would be an alternative solution to striking? It's been 2 years, 100,000 people. The diplomatic channels and the political channels may not have been as successful as people had hoped or wished for.
But that is precisely what is needed, is the diplomatic channels. We need desperately urgent diplomacy now, not military strikes, which are going to potentially kill more civilians in Syria and certainly do nothing to end the war, nothing to make civilians, Syrians, any safer, nothing that will make Americans safer, for sure. And what we need to do is get back to the negotiating table. Whether you call it Geneva 2, you can call it Geneva 6, you can call it broccoli, whatever you call it, get back to the talks with both sides getting their allies to the table. So Russia needs to be at the table, and it needs to get Iran and Iraq and Syria to the table. The U.S. needs to be at the table, but it needs to bring along the forces that are supporting the opposition. It needs to bring Saudi and Qatar and the UAE and Turkey with it, so that all stakeholders are represented in those talks. Otherwise, it won't work. A military strike will do nothing to make the war end any sooner.
So maybe that first step is going back to Russia with that peace negotiation. Phyllis Bennis, as always, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.